Hey guys, welcome to this video. Thanks so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness, the highest levels of love light. Hopefully my microphone is working. I just wanted to pop on briefly and talk a little bit about lots of big energies coming in as usual. Physical, people aren't sleeping, including me. A lot of crazy dreams all over the place. Time traveling, astral projecting, going through plasma, seeing inside of crystals. And it's not just me that's having this experience. A lot of us are. And if we don't remember them, it's part of what we're doing in dream time. Some of us, this is happening during meditation. I just jumped right into it, didn't I? This is our individual, unique journey. And what the biggest message that my guides have been sharing, and I'll post this in writing. I did a video and I realized I came off a little bit harsh because I was just seeing this projection going on in the light worker community. And the message that I keep getting is there are beautiful light workers of truth and harmony and light and love who really intend and do good deeds and walk into a room and light it up because they're in a place of neutrality and peace and love. They might have voted. They may not have voted. They may believe in voting. They may not believe in voting. They might believe in a particular candidate. They might believe in the opposite candidate of what somebody else believes is the true representative of light. There may be somebody who has had, I'm just using this as an example to kind of paint a picture. There are beautiful light workers out there that don't know anything about the rays of light or the angelics, but they do good deeds and they have a family that they raise, that they teach to do unto others the golden rule. There are light workers out who have studied all of the Gnostic teachings. And there are other light workers, starseeds, humans, who haven't studied any of them and know nothing about them. There are those that know the true history of our DNA and the true history of our ancestors. And there are those who really don't know about any of that, yet they are kind to their fellow human beings. And the question the message that I keep getting that's coming through is, yes to all of that. It doesn't matter what someone else does believe or doesn't believe from my guide's perspective. If they are doing no harm to others and they are being kind to their peers, to their children, to their parents, to their family, if they are treating the earth with respect, they may not know that there are parallel realities or other versions of Earth. They may not be awake to the real truth about what's going on behind the scenes. They might be blissfully ignorant of all of that, yet they're still doing what they need to do to create a beautiful reality on this earth. They may be giving to the poor and supporting their brothers and sisters and helping humanity in their own way because they are a unique individual expression of source unfolding and beginning to understand itself from that perspective. And in that, they are in complete unification with their true source, and that living proof or living their life in that way, walking in that way, being the change they wish to see in the world, not projecting their beliefs onto others necessarily with a harshness of this isn't right and this isn't right and this is the way to go. Those people are also holding the light and holding space. They don't necessarily understand the matrix and how it works. They may not understand what's going on behind the scenes. Because in their reality, that does not affect or have an effect on how they treat their friends, neighbors, family coworkers, because they just bring it. And all of those other versions of reality do not affect who they are at the core. And those particular beings I really honor, because I get triggered sometimes, and especially when all of this, not so much anymore, but I went through stages and I couldn't believe how somebody else couldn't see through the false grid and the false matrix and couldn't understand that our true DNA heritage isn't from what we've been told. And I would have people that would try to tell me about this particular religion or this particular politician or this particular truth to them. And I knew in my heart and in my, forget the heart, I knew intellectually, because of the knowledge that I had, that what they had to share and what was their truth was really not correct, according to my truth, which in essence was a broader truth than to what they were really understanding. Yet what I've come to realize is that's their path. And if they have questions to ask about my truths, they will ask me. Or our paths will cross in such a way that a conversation will unfold that is not me projecting my truths onto them. And in that way, we can hold space for one another and expand into the perspective of each other and unfold from our own space of reality, so to speak. And what my guides are basically saying is that there's a lot of projection going on, and it's many people are feeling the need to speak up and speak their truth, yet doing it in such a way that it is declaring that the people they are speaking to or speaking about are wrong, misled, and their truth is the correct truth. Even in spirituality, or I should say unconventional spirituality. And sometimes that can be misleading for those that they're sharing these truths to. That can sometimes be misleading, of course, for themselves. And I would venture to say that many of us at some point have done that in our lives. I've done it. But the more that we can just honor each other for where we're at and learn from one another and and use our discernment and not necessarily accept someone else's story as our truth, the more we can open to the true source connection of who we really are. And that's different for everyone. We are all connected to source, but in these distortions and in these fields of distortion, what I was shown was there are these teachers who came down, for example, and said, I am directly related to Zeus, for example. I am this, fill in the blanks, this archetype. I am the master of. And while there are some teachers who maintained those titles, yet still taught from a place of neutrality, there are many stories that we know in our history books where that neutrality did not exist, and these teachers and gods and goddesses that believed that they were closer to source than we were, who felt that they had something that needed to be taught in a specific way because they knew more than perhaps my neighbor did or I did, because they came directly from source. Yet their idea and concept about what source is and what that connection means was very, let's say, distorted. And so they taught, this is how you need to worship God. This is the building you need to go in. These are the symbols that you need to make sacred in order for God to accept you. And in order for you to be closer to God, you have to listen to me because I am closer to God than you are. Does that make sense? This is like an old way. And perhaps at one time that was helpful for people who had been so far removed from source because they forgot that was helpful to get them on that track. But that misrepresentation or delusion or distortion that these higher powers were offering then created a God construct, or what's the word? Ideology construct, where people began to idolize or worship or put these beings on a pedestal. And maybe they did have higher powers. Maybe they had the power of telepathy or the power of claircognizance, clairaudient, clairvoyant. They could see the future. And these other people maybe couldn't see the future. They made predictions that came true. Therefore, these other beings thought they were better or smarter or stronger or closer to God, therefore more godlike, and became their followers. I'm sharing this because it's very easy to fall into that. So many words come into mind: entrapment, seduction, habitual pattern, thought construct, limiting relationship, status. I mean, there's so many different layers to tap into. And what I'm being guided to share is it's very important. I keep going back to the Bible where I believe Jesus says, "Have I not told you ye are all gods?" And I'm not sure if it's said exactly in those words, but Jesus was speaking, whether you believe or don't believe in the man Jesus, or Siddhartha and Buddha, or whatever these masters and ascended masters and God source beings, whether you believe in them or not, the teachings that come through that are in that neutral perspective that puts us all on a level playing field as source, because we all are connections to source, those teachings are valuable and can be very useful. And they were there, passed down generation to generation for a reason. Yet there are always these man-made human distortions, or even distortions from psychics and God-type archetypes and masters who, yes, they had valuable teachings, but because they felt, we could use the word entitled, or it could even be the opposite, where they felt that they were so pure, right, that their teachings were the only truth because they were that connected to source. God was speaking directly to them. And I listen to many teachers and I honor all of them because I've learned many different things. None of my teachings that I share are ever, from my perspective, the only way to go, the only messages that are coming through, because we're all connected to source. My perspective is completely different than another person who does what I do. And that's cool. That's really, I think that's so neat. It's so neat. It's really awesome to be able to share this reality with so many different beautiful perspectives, harmonies that create this symphony that we all exist within. And the biggest message that I'm getting right now is just to remind myself and to remind others that we all have beauty and goodness to bring to the table. Even if we weren't always working for the greater goodness of all, maybe people have shifted and morphed into changing their moving out of chaos, and maybe they've decided to move back into unity and oneness with Source. But essentially, we are all connected to Source all of the time. And the more we create these separations and these categories and rules that are limiting, the more separation we create. And a lot of what's being projected at us from a lot of different sources, whether it be other spiritual teachers, surprisingly, can be surprising sometimes. The television, right? The media is a perfect example. You should believe this because they are a more credible source than this person. Therefore, everything that this person says is not credible. Who said that? How connected to source are they? What that source, right? I'm using the word source interchangeably here. And I like to use the word source to be a multi-dimensional frequency word. My sources say, really, who are those sources and where are their perspectives coming from? We all have different perspectives. We all have different truths. Something can be true, and then more information comes in later that says, well, it was true then, but it no longer is the only truth. And that is the message that keeps coming through over and over and over again. It's getting out of this need to be a follower of a particular, fill in the blanks, belief system without, and this is kind of the whole point, doing our own inner work. Because once we do our inner work and once we find our truth, which may not be that other spiritual teacher's truth, and coming into that space of being okay with that, yet honoring the other teacher for what maybe we have gleaned from them that's maybe triggered us or activated us or inspired us, and seeing that person, may the light within me see the light within you, from that truth, it makes things so much easier. It makes things so much more expansive, creative, and really brings, from my perspective, us back into that frequency of oneness. And I no longer have that need or desire to tell the person next to me that what they believe in is wrong, or tell the person next to me that they aren't following the right way. I did have that desire, and it was very strong, even up until, 6 months ago, about certain subjects. I was passionate about these subjects. And that has completely shifted for me. I'm a completely different person about all of this. And it's been a valuable lesson for me. And I think that I'm feeling many other people are feeling this too. Like all of a sudden, those things are not as important. Not to say that they aren't important, not to say that they aren't real. And I'm not trying to invalidate necessarily for somebody else's journey what's important for them. Because it was important for me to go through that, to have these judgments, to have this influx of information come in about what was going on in the mainstream spiritual region. What is this entity? What about these angels? What about this color spectrum in this ray group? And what about the Arcturians? And I love all of that still. The difference is, after I went in and followed my own truth, which was meditation, journaling, mantras, whatever I could do to bring myself back into my own alignment with my own unique individual expression, that yes, plugged into all of these others, and then recognized that there's more to all of that. It becomes easier for us to accept others and offer space for others where they're at, meet them where they are in their own journey, and not, impress upon them or be forceful in my own presentation, project onto someone else what I know to be true, because I can share it. What I know to be true, I share through my own way and my own presentation. If you guys are watching this, this is an example of me just sharing. And we all have that ability and capability to do that. But from my perspective also, it is about not forcefully projecting our opinions and views on others, or if we have some truth to share, sharing it with compassion and being open to why that other person has that perspective. That can be empowering as well. Now, I'm not saying we ignore it. We just say, oh, that's interesting. Why do you feel that way? Well, this is why I feel this way. Oh, I never thought about it from that perspective. It allows this exchange of information and energy without being in a defensive space. And it also allows us to admit when we're wrong about something, or giving space for another to admit that perhaps they aren't necessarily, when I say wrong, oh, I judged that person maybe a little too harshly. Or maybe I thought this is the way, that it was the only way to go, but now I'm kind of seeing that there is more to the picture, if that makes sense. So this is the biggest message that I feel is coming through from my guides. And recognizing that we've all been in that space of being and feeling, being completely asleep or completely unaware or being deceived about certain things, right? I feel that many of us have been there, done that. And because we've been there and done that, we may feel the need to then project onto somebody else, well, I've been there and that's why I'm telling you not to do this. And that is valuable too at times, just like a big sister will share with her little sister, or a parent will tell their child. But also recognizing that that child needs room to make their own mistakes. And let me rephrase that, because sometimes they aren't really mistakes. Sometimes they are necessary steps that they need to take in order to learn or understand something in their own way, in their own experience, in their own timing, so to speak. The other thing that was coming through was, and this is, I'll just end on this note. I went a lot longer than I planned. Is obviously not being too hard on ourselves when we do make these judgments, but if we do that inner work, the message that's been coming through and I keep getting is avoidance. What are we, if we're completely delving into other people's prophecies, other people's teachings, other people's opinions, even if it's a very valuable, knowledgeable source, if it's a validated source, that's great and that can be very helpful. But how are we renewing our own truth and source, and where are we getting this information from? Because the information is in form at ionic presence, I am. We are the information. Therefore, if we're not meditating, we're not in prayer, if we're following false doctrines, and let me just be very clear about the truth situation. Someone else's truth may be true. It may not be our truth. And when I say false doctrines, yes, there have been many teachings that have been falsified. But when we use our discernment, because we are in a space of neutrality, we are doing what the example I used earlier of do unto others and not being a dictator, not projecting our own fears or our own journey onto someone else's in a negative way when we think we're doing a positive thing, right? These are all things that we're being invited to just look at. And when we take a step back and go within, sometimes all of those false things just don't exist anymore for us. And I'm being very vague right now because this is a general energy that's being offered. It's being able to tap into the higher source at the connection of the heart and not the connection of the head and the mind. And when we really tap into that, the need to tell someone else that I'm right or you're wrong kind of just goes away. Of course, if someone's being mean or bullying or downright and they are invading your boundaries, so to speak, or stepping on your journey, we of course have the right to say, I don't agree with that. And that is not okay. So thank you, but no thank you. Return to sender. And not get drawn into this, I'm more spiritual than that person is, right? I'm more awake than those people are. That might be true to a certain extent or from a certain perspective or a certain reality, but there may be more than we know from that perspective. And then the question becomes, who am I? What makes me more spiritual than somebody else who may have had a completely different life experience that I know nothing about? There are a lot of people saying things, saying words that are, I hear the word spouting off, like, I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Like, it's coming out, all of this stuff, right? And in doing that, they're purging in front of an audience because they haven't necessarily found that balance. A lot of people are waking up in front of us. And it can be a very beautiful thing if you come from a place of neutrality to understand that and see that. And it can also be challenging for us when we're not coming from a place of neutrality to see that's what's going on and allow it to trigger us. And I've done it. I get triggered sometimes and I'm just like, ooh, that just made me feel a little frustrated or surprised that that person's behaving that way. But that would be my expectations put on that person to behave in a certain way that maybe they're not aware that's available to them. So there is this constant flow that we're being invited to see, feel, and be open to. And so stepping away from these layers and levels and recognizing that there's always more layers to awakening. And just because someone is clairvoyant or someone is clairaudient doesn't make them any more spiritual than us. Because spirit is in everything. They may not know anything about the trees and Mother Earth, and this is something that sings in your heart. They may not understand anything about taking care of children and being a support network for an elderly mother or father. Who knows? And beyond all of that, it's irrelevant for our growth. So it always comes back to us. Words that others are using are their words until we choose to take them into our reality and digest them, if you will, and choose to then inform an opinion around their words that they are projecting through their own journey that we may not agree with because we know better. But there becomes this thin line between knowing better and operating from a place of grace and operating from a place of our own projections or our own fears or processes, things that we are processing. And then it becomes this battle of the light workers, so to speak, or battle of the star seeds, and it's a passive aggressiveness that seems to be trickling in through this, and I don't even want to say should be a community of unity and oneness, because that would be my own projection and expectation of what I see it should be. And that's not necessarily true either. I would love for the Starseed community to unite as one in a diverse and beautiful community where we can explore all of this. And this is the case for many beings in this, which is beautiful. And I'm grateful to all my brothers and sisters who are on this journey with me. And so I'm just in that space, in love and light. Namaste.